Hi, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well, or moderately so at least. We're into our winter season up here, and uh, it hasn't really shown itself yet. We're going to have a couple of days of nice, warm, lovely weather, 19 and 20 degrees. So we're looking forward to it. I have a couple of questions for tonight. Remember, in the answers to these questions, this is just a point of view from from myself, and you have to think these things through on your own as well, see whether they make any sense to you. Here's a question from Toshi out in California, in Oakland. He says, I've been reading more Alice Bailey. When she speaks of Moses bringing law into humanity with the Ten Commandments, Jesus brings love as described in the Gospels, and Paul the Apostle bringing unity and synthesis. I'm not as familiar with Paul's teaching, and can you explain what this unity and synthesis describes? Well, probably not perfectly. I can only do it from my perspective. If you may or may not know, and it's probably a good idea that everyone attempts at least to read uh, some Paul and especially the four major books of the New Testament. I would suggest even the Old Testament, as far as I'm concerned, and at the same time, a lot of the other religiously focused books, and you'll find that there are some very strong similarities in them. Uh, you don't have to look very far. It just depends on whether you're willing to see them, but they're there. So the one thing, just basic stuff. Um, Peter was a fisherman, and he was a follower of Jesus while Jesus was alive, as the rest of the disciples. Paul had a religious experience on the way to Damascus, and he was a pretty intense fellow. He was out to find all the Christians and have them arrested, as the story goes. And in this religious experience that he was talked to purportedly from that higher level, or that higher Christian level, Jesus the Christ. That was a word that he used for being Christed, having a crown. And remember that Peter was Jewish, and I believe that Paul was Armenian. Now, you can look that up. This is historical. And seek elsewhere other than the Bible to look some of this stuff up. It's worthwhile, perhaps on your part. And Peter was, in a way, designated to build the Christian church. And the Christian church at that particular point was still related to being a church related to the Jewish background and not to the Gentiles. And Peter was an individual who thought that the Gentiles should be also brought into the church. And in a kind of a way, through that particular angle, he was considered that he brought unity, the unity of Christianity to all all types of folks, no matter who they were. And thus, kind of a way, I guess, you could call this kind of synthesis, making the Gentiles involved as well with the Christian church, because it was considered to be a Jewish background church, because he was considered to be the Messiah. And that was coming out of the Jewish background, not out of any Gentile background at all. So in that particular way, Alice Bailey is probably looking at it from an angle that relates to being able to allow Christianity to be involved with Gentiles. As it happened, the Italian or the Roman background was copied by the Christian church, and Peter became the symbolic head of that church based on what was known. And what was known was that he was asked to build this church. But remember, Paul was the writer, Peter was a fisherman. And Paul had his intensity and an intense focus on whatever he did, and he became intensely focused on bringing in other Christians into the fold that were not only Jewish in background. So that, without getting into a lot of other stuff related to the New Testament, I would suggest you read Peter just to see if he was inclined to engage with others out of the Jewish background, and also to recognize that there was a little bit of scuttlebutt between Peter and Paul, and I guess you could say, if you're looking at it from one point of view, that Paul and Peter made up, and Paul became kind of the head of looking into the Gentile and getting them to attempt to believe in Christianity at the time. Toshi, it's worthwhile taking a look into some of this background. And there is a lot written about the four books, Christian books, in the New Testament, purported to be written by, some believe, the actual disciples, but the disciples would have been too old to write them literally. And it is noted, though, that a book that was written by a person whose name was James might have been the originating, let's say, background book that was taken, because it was purported to be written at the time of Jesus and around that his death. I can't tell you where to look. You'll have to see if you can find it for yourself, because I heard this in a lecture, and lectures are not always written down. I wish you well with that one, but please inquire. You have inquiring minds, and you are intelligent, so a little research might be helpful in that one. Let me know what you find out. This next question is a question from Lee Martin. And that's one that's tickled my fancy as well from time to time. Um, since we're in this holiday season, he says, and he doesn't want to limit this just to the holiday season, this question, but how does one account for the human attraction to horror, particularly violent gore and death? Uh, some, if not many people, truly seem to enjoy movies, TV shows, and books featuring it. But I, for one, have never understood this attraction, at least since my teens. It has puzzled me, and I wonder about the psychological, spiritual, and energy pattern perspective. Can't speak for all of that. What I can speak for is there is a kind of thrilling aspect that a personality seeks. If you take a look at your interest, even around people, if a person seems to entertain you, then you seek them out to be actually entertained. You might call them friend, or you might call them this or that. Doesn't matter what you call them. It's kind of a reflexive thing in that personality core that is involved with stimulation of the emotional digestion, you could call it, uh, where you begin to, if you go to these kinds of movies, and you often might do that when you're a kid. Of course, when I was a kid, they weren't really that scary, but the view of them being scary was still there. So there was a kind of sense of self being stimulated. And if you go with a group of people, 3 or 4 teenagers, for example, or 3 or 4 adults or whatever, then you're also stimulated by other people's responses to these things. And it's the personality that's entertained. The emotional part is entertained. And strangely enough, these things are made into kind of a happening, as opposed to actually, if you went on your own, you might find them not interesting or not entertaining as much as you would when you're engaging with others and saying, "Oh, did you see that show? Wow." And you laugh and you talk about it. And it's part of a communion thing or a community thing. Uh, Real horror is not like that. Real horror, and this is entertainment, of course, but real horror would you wouldn't want to be around it because it is nothing. It's hard to bear, horrible to bear, and you wouldn't seek it out ever. So in the imagination world, you're an observer in a kind of a way, and you're basically thinking that you're entertaining yourself. Actually, what you're doing is stimulating more emotion than you need to, in my opinion. And it causes you to overreact in a lot of cases, internally or externally, to something that maybe doesn't need as much reaction when you're just in normal life, because you're also already stimulated. There's a stimulation that occurs deep down, and you reflexively overreact in things. And this can happen with anything. It's a tremendous adrenaline rush sometimes for some people. And if you want to look at energetically, it simulates the root center, fear, gonad center, intensity, and your emotional disposition. And you absolutely don't really think that's going to bother you. And it will. Many people do this because they they need that kind of jump. They already have a, adrenaline kind of stimulation inside in very subtle ways. It could be through family background. It can be through the type of friends that you've engaged with. It could be just simply because, oh, I hate to say this out loud, you might be a little bit bored with life unless it stimulates you. And this is unfortunately one of the things that are paramount in our world. We like to be stimulated by other people. Um, it's unfortunate in a way. In another way, you could say, yes, but Ron, it's better to be stimulated by other people than just be engaging with them. Much rather be stimulated and entertained by them. In fact, sometimes not so much. Uh, Rather be interested in a few other things from time to time. But nonetheless, stimulation is part of our engagement with life. Um, but our intensity internally as an adult is hard enough to handle without excessive stimulation. If you watch the kids going around at Halloween time, you'll notice that they're really focused on the candy and having a good time with the costumes that they've made up. And if you ask them questions like Mommy did primarily at Halloween, they're happy to tell you who they are. And some adults will do the same thing because that's entertaining. You get a thrill about their entertainment value. And it's how we sometimes tend to be, some of us. I hope that helps a little bit. I'm not saying it's a negative thing only, but in our world, we have very strong primal urges to be, let's say, a rendering of happy, whatever that means. And when you're smiling and laughing, that denotes enjoying. So when a person is responding sometimes to these kinds of things, sometimes they're really not fearful inside at all. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they're not. They just act as if they are. It's like an imaginary thing. But you do that often enough and it becomes real for you. And you have to idealize that kind of a packaging that you're making up in terms of your identity. It's a bit like becoming excessively expressive sometimes. Then you continue to be that way because you're hooked on that kind of intensity. And you can get hooked on these kinds of things very easily because it stimulates you with this adrenaline rush. And if you're with friends, you laugh about it and you giggle and you grumble and you moan. And so just part of practicing to create an identity of a kind that makes you feel kind of semi-good inside because you're smiling. I hope that helps a little bit. I'm going through these a little faster than I want to, but nonetheless, here's one for Marie-Jose Peria. Can you be enlightened without practicing in this life meditation or following a religious tradition? Can an atheist be enlightened? This is one of the most difficult things that sages have been worried about for so many centuries. They always were fearful that an individual would do many things to become lit up inside with more energy and then follow through and build their version of what stands to be important in the lives of many people, and that is their own self-interest, building an image that is superior to everybody else's. This has always been one of the things that had been talked about in secret, some not so secret, but in secret, primarily about the danger and the fear that folks can become very adept at doing certain things that would relate from some people's minds to being spiritual, and only spiritual folks can do those kinds of things. In fact, many folks can do all kinds of things. If you've ever read anything on parapsychology, uh, and I think Secret Discoveries or something like that, Behind the Iron Curtain. Um, by the way, that was a big book in the 60s and the 70s um, about learning how to move pieces of iron across the table with your mind, being able to leave your body and engage with others unseen, and then you have every right to do whatever you want, things of this nature. To engage with other people and move into them mentally, and see how they actually are inside, and even attempt to manipulate them. These were all things the sages of past times have always been afraid of, that could possibly happen by people stealing how to engage with higher states, and knowing that the love of higher states communes with everyone. This is a universal thing that is not understood well by us at all. And because higher states had this tremendous knowing inside that an individual, if they could see that they were doing harm, would eventually get to the point where they would not do harm because it would be against everything within them. Certainly anything that moves them in a direction to growing in some manner. We've long found out that people in just a normal life prefer to win an argument versus lose one. They prefer to get their way with others because it makes them feel good. So they would do their best to put down others so that they would feel less bad about not being as able as somebody else. And this is consistent in humanity. Yet at the same time, there are many human beings who would not do such a thing, would not even consider it for a second. And if they ever saw that, they would be embarrassed within themselves about themselves. And that is something that has been a big deal. So the question is, can an individual become focused on themselves and be important and, how could I say this, manipulative based on their own way of seeing the world? Answer is yes. You have all kinds of that in play on our planet, financially, business wise, uh, any kind of a thing. And we play hockey and we play football and we play any kind of sport. The object is not to say to the other team, you really played a good game. I know you won by 1 point, but I really admire how well you played. During the game, this is not spoken. And if you have favorite teams out there and you're considering your sporting event and your favorite team, you don't want them to lose. You want them to win. We have that in us. It's the way we are. We tend to be that. When we're talking to others, we would not like them to think that we were manipulative or engaged with spiritual growth for the purpose of becoming more capable at something that made you more important than God, if there is such a thing from your way of seeing things. It's worth a thought. It's worth a recognition. It's worth an attempt to see those things that you have in you. I would see that, look for me, you would look for you, and try to slow them down a bit. But then again, you have the other side of the coin, where an individual never thinks they do that kind of thing. It's always the other person who does it. This is in the nature of our survival. This is a defensive mode. And the other person can do it. It's true. But so can you. And if you're missing it, you're cultivating the intensity you have in your system to help you to become prominent, because you have a superior position installed in the way you function in life. And what that does is holds you in a position of following your personalizations. You need them to live in life, but making them bigger than they are doesn't help you to live a decent life. Although, and I'm going to say this clearly, anybody, including atheists, Marie, can be good people. Think about that. Because you're a good Christian, it doesn't mean you're a good person. Because you're a good Muslim or a Hindu or a Buddhist doesn't make you a good person. But it can. The generalizations are a little bit more difficult. And harder to understand. So pull back from the generalization if you can. There's a lot of people, I'll add another one in there, an agnostic, just may or may not believe in something, but just hasn't had any proof from their point of view that such a thing might exist. There are so many different ways to look at life. And that has to include folk who would try anything to be engaged with the higher state. But they don't necessarily believe exactly in the same way that you do about what that higher state is. And we have a very, very concerning manner when it comes to belief systems. We judge belief systems when we don't know anything about them. We maintain them when we don't know anything about them. Look into them. Learn. See if there is consistency across the whole plane of higher states. Make sense of it for yourself. It's a big job. Sometimes you would even, you don't want to do that. Well, that's up to you. But it might be worthwhile doing something like that. And worthwhile looking at something related to how you engage with life. One of the biggest, most interesting things that I find fascinating is all across the board, with few exceptions, folks talk about understanding themselves so they can begin to understand how difficult others engaging with life find that engaging part. And find it's very difficult to see things within yourself. And because it is annoying when you do, if those things are uncomfortable in your terms with you, and suddenly you find out that you're seeing some similar things in others at the same time. It's an eye opener and it's humbling to be honest with yourself. And you'll only be able to do that to some degree. You won't be able to do that in an idealistic way of catching everything. It's just not possible. But you may have an imaginary thought that says to you, you've caught everything inside of you, and all those other people aren't like you. Well, they're not like you. It's true. They have things that are similar to you, and you use them differently. And they use their versions differently. There is a kind of something that is really hard to speak of. When you're engaging with life, there will be times when you will have a very small level of belief system in higher states, whatever you call them. Even your belief in whatever you believe in will become suspect. You'll keep it to yourself because you don't want anybody that aligns with you to think that you don't align with them. But this is normal in our world. And one of the things that is really interesting as you gain more awareness, you can perceive that energy in and around you. But at some point, you will think it's just about you. You will do that because it's part of being human. You probably won't think that that energy or that flow is a part of you, but a part of you you really don't understand too well. But you really don't understand it too well. You can perceive it. So watch it. And if you can perceive it, when you're out amongst people, don't judge what you think it's doing. Just watch it. You're curious. But curiosity is different than assessment. It just is. Assessment is there for you to construct a platform so you can listen to those words in that platform and see whether you agree with them or not. When you speak words to other people, even, you have an aspect of expressing those words so that you can see what you think about a certain topic. You could easily say, oh, well, I thought about that, but you haven't, not deeply. You may have copied a thought from somebody else. And sometimes you say something, and in fact, it's not real. Or you say something, or someone else says something, and you believe that you already thought of that, but you didn't. That's why we have newspapers. That's why we have the news. That's why people listen to the news and they copy what they've heard. And they do that because they haven't thought about it. It's not easy to do that. And if you really understood how newsprint really worked, these papers give opinions. You don't have to see that opinion as gospel. But you do, because you get to like someone who writes it that kind of semi-aligns with how you think things are. It's what we have been trained to do. The same is true when we try to attempt to understand higher states when you're involved with them at its lowest level. What do you mean by lowest level? At the level where it enables us to live and function and engage with life reflexively. I said reflexively. It's true. And then we notice what we've done or how we do it. And sometimes we can't see what we did or how we did this or that, because it aligns with a reflexive modality that incorporates everything that we are: a physical form, a way of speaking, the way of thinking, or polishing a kind of format we call personality. There is exactly nothing wrong with this, except for one minor detail. It's reflexive, often. And we can learn to be okay with that, but also okay with the idea that it is reflexive. And we have to think about what we believe we're saying and why we're saying that. But of course, it's too busy to think about everything. So you'll pick your spots, as every one of us does, and attempt to the best of your ability to allow yourself to seek a kind of honesty in there. Within you, not to express to other people, no, to express to you, so you can try to understand where you are versus creating a canopy of your insistence on being right or wrong or this or that. I think that that's exciting. That part is exciting. And I think that's very difficult to do. Gaining respect from you is one part of that. Being respectful of you and others is another part of it. Yes, kindness is important. We have that on the board. It affects the heart for sure. But you're also a person who will defend what you believe is an onslaught of other stuff rather than yours. Normal. Not normal to see it. Normal to do it. To investigate slowly and respectfully leaves you opening to another understanding of you that you normally aren't overly interested in finding. And this is not about your assessment or your judgment of you. It's about curiosity, about holy smokes. I wonder if, from time to time. And this relates deeply to a relationship with the concept of enlightenment. My version of enlightenment is an individual who's able to handle tremendous levels of subtle flow or force or energy operating through them for the good of others, not necessarily only the good of themselves. But there's a combination that has to occur, and our personalizations, our personality demands this. And in some cases, if energy can operate through you for the purpose of helping another, it will operate through you for the purpose of helping someone that you don't think they should get that help. But they deserve that help as much as you do because you don't know them. You know the flowers and the trees that are all around their landscape from your perspective, of course. You think you understand them well, but you don't. You are not in them. You are not them. And they would not have you in them. So understanding that flow enables an individual where they are to be somewhere in relationship to a way of engaging beyond where you can see. And this is the role of someone who would determine to be enlightened. And the next thing is, within that, they would not be interested in having anybody know that was going on. That's real enlightenment. More than we know. So to look at enlightenment from a point of view relating only to one way of seeing things doesn't make any sense. It has to do with you can believe in almost anything except if you can engage with that higher state, then the higher state is helpful to others through you, not only through the mouth, not only because you digest things and spit them out in a certain kind of a way, and you call that way the only way that you can do it and it's the best way around. That's nonsense. There's always more. So, in the process of movement towards enlightenment, this mode, this engaging within you to see you the best you can, has to be gentle and respectful. And it's not so simple sometimes. And kind. Also not so simple sometimes. And honest. Got to find that somehow. And you can be that the best you can. The best you can. I'll do it the best I can. You do it the best you can. But that does not mean an assessment or a judgment from the personality's way of thinking things are. That is related to helping you to understand where you are and do the best you can from there. And continue. And don't ever stop, no matter what. Because that core engagement is there, and it's a lot slower going than people want it to be. And the people got there quickly from their beliefs, they would be yelling and screaming, not so much. I can't see, I can't take seeing everything so clearly. And they would go into their natural tendency to become fearful, and therefore their defenses would come up strongly to counteract their fear. In the old way of seeing things, people used to say, have patience, trust, but have patience. I think the have patience part is really hard. Having trust is even harder. Because in these things, in this growing, everyone has ideas about how that should be. God, we have labels on these things. But when you meet someone who is growing deep down, they touch you where you're growing, not where you want to see yourself as an individual who's really grown up. I'm just saying. And that's true of us all. But that person would have no judgment on what it sees, because it's looking not at your personality, it's really looking at the energy engagement and where it is and why it's there. It's serving a purpose. Has that purpose because that's where the need is in that individual in their growing process. It's not a negative thing. And it's not a idealized personality thing either. It has nothing to do with that at all. But to be honest, everyone would like to be able to and I'd love to be able to say that I'd love everyone to be really enlightened. I would. I really would. Because that would give us half a chance. But we're not half a chance to grow even more, is what I mean. But we're not ready for that, I don't think. Although I think we are ready to know that that internal flow is there. And they used to call that enlightenment, but it's not enlightenment. It's more like beginning to see that you have that engagement with these states that can be noticed by us, even at these levels. That's very respectful. And we begin to grow from there and begin to learn it's not about our personalities. We don't even keep these personalities exactly the same way if we happen to engage in other lifetimes, wherever that may be. Although we do keep some aspects of it, for sure. Because there's core growing areas within us, always. And we need the help in our growing. So I hope that answers that question a little bit. And the primary aspect is it's not about your belief, it's about your engagement with something within you as it relates to others. Christianity has always been, in my opinion, a kind of service orientation. Buddhists feel the same way. In a kind of a way, Islamic folks are the same way. Hebrew, the same way. Community service. Hindu, same thing. Often others that are living in a village, engaging with energy of a sort, feel the same way. They're pro the village. The service idea is profoundly prominent in all backgrounds that relate to higher states. Think about it. Not so simple to come up with golden rules in relationship to what we think we need to be like. Although we do that, and we do it fairly consistently. I don't know about the honesty part of it, but we do it. We do it in relationship to our thinking, I guess, and where we are. So I'd like to close off now, and we're going to do some meditating. It's about 5 to 8. We'll do some meditating, and I wish everybody well, and I'll see you on the weekend, those of you who can come. Bye for now. And now we'll just begin to do the balancing and grounding on your own. I wish you well. Take care.